Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Birthday Surprise. Vaughn Mercer stared at the cream-colored invitation in his hand, tracing the embossed lettering with his thumb. Natalie's 35th birthday celebration. His ex-wife of 2 years, celebrating in the sprawling lake house that had once been their shared dream. Now she lived there with Bradley Hoffman, the man she'd married just 8 months after their divorce was finalized. "You don't have to go, Dad," Lily said, her 7-year-old eyes wise beyond their years as she packed her overnight bag. "I can tell Mom you had to work." Vaughn knelt down to her level. "And miss dropping you off?" "Never. Besides, your mom and I agreed to be civil for your sake." What he didn't say was that he would endure far worse than an awkward social gathering to ensure he never missed a moment of Lily's life. The custody arrangement already took too much from him. Every other weekend and Wednesday dinners hardly seemed enough to watch his daughter grow. "Bradley doesn't like when you come inside," Lily said matter-of-factly. Vaughn kept his expression neutral, though his jaw tightened. "Well, that's Bradley's problem, isn't it?" The lake house loomed ahead as Vaughn's Audi wound down the private drive. Natalie had insisted on keeping it in the divorce, the place where they'd spent their first 5 anniversaries before buying it outright. Now, it was transformed, the rustic charm he'd loved replaced with sleek, modern furnishings. Even the exterior had been painted from warm cedar to sterile white. Cars lined the circular driveway. He recognized Natalie's parents' Lexus and several vehicles belonging to friends who'd chosen sides after the divorce. None had chosen his. "Lily!" Natalie exclaimed as they entered, her smile faltering when she spotted Vaughn. She wore a form-fitting black dress, her blonde hair styled in loose waves. "I didn't expect you to come in. Just dropping off the birthday girl," Vaughn said, handing Lily's overnight bag to Natalie. "Happy birthday." Before Natalie could respond, Theodore and Diana Keller approached, their faces hardening at the sight of their former son-in-law. Behind them, Bradley emerged from the crowd, his arm possessively circling Natalie's waist. "Vaughn," Theodore said coldly. "What a surprise." "Hardly a welcome one," Diana muttered, loud enough for Vaughn to hear. Bradley smirked. "Why are you even here?" he asked, as Diana and Theodore laughed in response. The tension was palpable. Vaughn had faced worse in his years as a private security specialist. Warlords and criminals had tried to intimidate him in ways these suburban socialites couldn't imagine. But something in their collective dismissal cut deeper than he cared to admit. "Dad's bringing me to Mom's party," Lily said defensively, moving closer to Vaughn. Bradley bent down to Lily's level, his voice saccharine. "Sweetie, why don't you go find the other kids? They're in the game room, downstairs." "Actually," Lily said, grabbing Vaughn's hand with unexpected urgency, "Dad, we need to leave. Something's wrong." The room fell silent. Vaughn looked into his daughter's eyes and saw genuine fear there. He gave a quiet nod. "I think we'll skip the party after all," Vaughn said calmly. "Seems Lily's not feeling up to it." Natalie stepped forward, her expression shifting from embarrassment to concern. "What's wrong, honey? Are you sick?" "She's fine," Bradley interjected. "She just wants attention." Vaughn felt Lily's grip tighten, her small fingers digging into his palm. Years of training had taught him to recognize warning signs, and every instinct told him his daughter's fear was genuine. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "I'll bring her back tomorrow." "You can't just change the custody schedule whenever you want," Natalie protested, but there was something off about her reaction, more calculated than concerned. Theodore stepped forward aggressively. "Now listen here, Mercer. You don't get to waltz in and disrupt Natalie's special day." As the confrontation escalated, Vaughn noticed something strange. A man standing near the bar was watching the scene with unusual intensity. He wasn't part of Natalie's usual social circle. Vaughn would have remembered him. The stranger caught Vaughn's eye briefly before turning away. "I'll call you later," Vaughn told Natalie, already guiding Lily toward the door. Outside, Lily remained silent until they were safely in the car and down the driveway. "You need to drive fast, Dad," she whispered, looking over her shoulder. "What's going on, Lily Pad? What scared you in there?" Her voice trembled. "I heard Bradley and that man with the scar talking in the study. They said they were going to take care of loose ends tonight." She paused, eyes wide. "Dad, they said your name." As Vaughn's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, a black SUV appeared in his rearview mirror, accelerating rapidly behind them. Chapter 2: Dead Drops and Revelations. The SUV hung back just enough to maintain visual contact without being obvious, a textbook surveillance technique that Vaughn recognized instantly. He'd performed the same maneuver countless times during his 12 years with Sentinel Security Group before starting his own consulting firm. "Lily, I need you to get down," Vaughn instructed calmly, his mind racing through contingency plans. "Lie on the floor behind my seat and stay there until I say it's safe." "Are the bad men following us?" Lily asked, her voice remarkably steady as she unbuckled and slid down. "Just being cautious," Vaughn replied, taking a sharp turn onto a side road. The SUV followed. Confirmation. Vaughn's training took over. He'd spent years protecting high-value targets in hostile environments across the globe. Now, the most precious cargo he'd ever transported was his daughter, and someone was trailing them with unknown intent. He needed a defensible position and information. 20 minutes of evasive driving later, Vaughn pulled into the underground parking garage of an office building where his friend Dominic Rizzo maintained a private security firm. "Stay close," he instructed Lily as they hurried through the service entrance and up to Dominic's empty office suite. Vaughn used his emergency key and quickly disabled the alarm. "Uncle Dom's not here?" Lily asked, looking around the darkened office. "He's in Dallas this week," Vaughn replied, moving to the security console. "But his systems are always working." He pulled up the exterior cameras, confirming the black SUV had not followed them into the garage. For now, they were clear. "Lily," Vaughn said gently, kneeling before his daughter, "I need you to tell me everything you heard at the party, even things that might not seem important." Lily's account was fragmented but disturbing. Bradley and a man she described as having an angry line on his face, presumably a scar, had been discussing something involving offshore accounts, a timeline that had been accelerated, and Vaughn being a problem that needed handling. "They seemed scared when they talked about a woman named Portia," Lily added. "Bradley said she was getting suspicious and might talk to you." The name hit Vaughn like a physical blow. Portia Devereux had been Natalie's best friend since college, and the one person who had reached out to Vaughn after the divorce, hinting that there was more to the breakup than he knew. They'd met for coffee once, 3 months ago, but she'd been vague and seemed frightened. She'd promised to contact him again with proof, but never did. Vaughn had dismissed it as divorce drama at the time, focusing instead on rebuilding his life and being there for Lily. Now, he wondered if that had been a catastrophic mistake. While Lily dozed on the office couch, Vaughn began pulling threads. A deep search on Bradley Hoffman revealed inconsistencies in his background. The successful investment advisor persona showed cracks under scrutiny, periodic employment gaps, sudden relocations, and a suspicious absence of digital footprint before 2015. More disturbing was what Vaughn found on Theodore Keller, Natalie's father. The retired banking executive had been investigated twice by federal authorities for suspicious financial transactions. Both cases were abruptly closed without charges. The lead investigators subsequently transferred or retired. By midnight, Vaughn had compiled enough to suspect he'd barely scratched the surface of whatever was happening. He needed more resources and a safe place for Lily. A text message alert broke his concentration. An unknown number with a single message. Portia Devereux found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide. Police involved. Watch yourself. Vaughn stared at his phone, ice forming in his veins. The message could only have come from one of his former colleagues at Sentinel, people who monitored police bands and kept tabs on potential security threats. Something much darker than a bitter ex-wife and her arrogant new husband was unfolding. Vaughn made 3 calls, one to his sister Renee to arrange emergency care for Lily, one to his attorney to document the custody situation, and one to a former associate who specialized in deep background investigations. By dawn, Lily was safely with his sister in a vacation cabin outside cell coverage, and Vaughn was back at his condo, methodically preparing for what was coming. He pulled his go bag from the hidden compartment in his closet. Cash, untraceable burner phones, and the Glock 19 he'd carried during his most sensitive operations overseas. As he loaded the weapon, Natalie's frantic voice filled his voicemail. "Where the hell are you with my daughter? Bradley's calling the police for kidnapping. This is insane, Vaughn. Whatever you think you're doing." He deleted the message and powered down his primary phone. The rules had changed. Someone had killed Portia to keep her quiet, and they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate him next. But unlike Portia, Vaughn wasn't easily eliminated. And now, he had something much more powerful than evidence. He had purpose. Chapter 3: The Devil's Ledger. Rain lashed against the windows of the abandoned waterfront warehouse as Vaughn waited, the cavernous space illuminated only by the faint glow of the city skyline. He checked his watch, 2:37 a.m., and adjusted his position behind a stack of rotting pallets. Franklin Wells was 20 minutes late, which was unlike the fastidious former CIA analyst. In their years working together at Sentinel, Wells had earned the nickname Clockwork for his precision. A delay meant complications. The heavy metal door finally creaked open, and Wells slipped inside, his raincoat glistening with moisture. He moved cautiously, scanning the shadows before approaching the meeting point. "You look like shit, Mercer," Wells said by way of greeting, his voice barely audible over the rain hammering the metal roof. "3 days of digging through other people's nightmares will do that," Vaughn replied. "Tell me you found something." Wells placed a weatherproof case on the ground between them. "I found the Devil's Ledger." He glanced nervously toward the door. "You were right about Bradley Hoffman. The man doesn't exist, at least not before 2015. His real name is Preston Rayburn, former financial operations specialist for a private military contractor called Obsidian Solutions Group. Never heard of them. That's by design. They operate in the spaces between official military operations and corporate interests. Very illegal, very profitable. Your ex-father-in-law, Theodore Keller, was their banking connection through Heritage Trust." Vaughn processed this information, the pieces starting to align. "And Natalie?" Wells looked uncomfortable. "That's where it gets complicated. I can't tell if she's a victim or a participant. Either way, she's in deep." He tapped the case. "Everything's in there. Account numbers, transactions, identities. Enough to bury them all. And Portia Devereux officially ruled a suicide yesterday. Unofficially, Wells grimaced. The ME's preliminary report noted defensive wounds inconsistent with self-harm. Someone made it look like she killed herself. Vaughn had suspected as much. Portia had been trying to warn him months ago, and it had cost her life. "There's more," Wells continued. "Obsidian is preparing for something big. Multiple offshore transfers, new identities being established. Whatever they've been doing, they're getting ready to disappear." "With my daughter?" Vaughn's voice had a dangerous edge. "The paperwork I found includes passport documentation for Natalie and a minor female. Different last name, but the birth date matches your daughter's." Vaughn had suspected this since finding the transaction records for a private air charter scheduled 3 days from now. Destination Sao Paulo, connecting to an undisclosed final location. "You need to take this to the FBI," Wells urged. "This is bigger than personal revenge, Vaughn. These people have government contracts, connections in intelligence communities. They've eliminated witnesses before. Like they'll eliminate Lily if she becomes inconvenient." Vaughn asked coldly, "How long would a federal investigation take? Months? Years? By then, my daughter will be gone." Wells sighed, recognizing the resolved expression on his former colleague's face. "What's your play, then?" "I'm going to dismantle their operation, piece by piece," Vaughn said, opening the case to review its contents. "Starting tonight." Among the documents was a detailed dossier on the scarred man Lily had described. Malcolm Reeves, Obsidian's head of security and former Special Forces operator with a troubling record of problem-solving. "One last thing," Wells said, handing Vaughn a flash drive. Security footage from Portia Devereux's apartment building the night she died. Took some doing to get this. Shows Reeves entering her building at 11:42 p.m., leaving at 12:17 a.m. Her time of death was estimated between 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. Vaughn pocketed the drive. "You should disappear for a while, Franklin. Take that vacation to New Zealand you've been talking about. Already booked, Wells confirmed. Vaughn. He hesitated. The woman you married. Either she's been living a double life for years, or she's been systematically deceived by these people. Either way, she's not who you thought she was. The revelation should have hurt, but Vaughn felt only cold resolve. The Natalie he'd loved, or thought he'd loved, had vanished long ago, replaced by a stranger wearing his wife's face. Get going, Vaughn said. And Wells? Thank you. After Wells departed, Vaughn remained in the warehouse, methodically reviewing the evidence and formulating his strategy. The documents revealed a complex network of financial crimes spanning 5 countries, with Theodore Keller and Bradley/Preston at the center. Obsidian had been laundering money through Heritage Trust for years, while using its security operations as cover for activities too terrible to contemplate. But the most sickening discovery came when Vaughn accessed the encrypted files on the flash drive. Beyond the security footage of Reeves entering Porsche's building was a folder labeled Leverage containing surveillance photos of him and Lily at the park, at her school, outside his condo. They'd been watching his daughter, documenting her movements, preparing to use her as collateral. As dawn broke over the city, Von Mercer made a vow. The people who threatened his daughter wouldn't face justice in a courtroom. They would face him, and he would be neither swift nor merciful. He began with a series of phone calls to former associates across the globe, specialists who operated in the shadows and owed him favors. By noon, his plan was in motion. Not the desperate actions of a wronged ex-husband, but the precise, calculated strategy of a man who had spent his career anticipating and neutralizing threats. The first strike would come that very night. Chapter 4. First Blood. The exclusive Oakmont Country Club hummed with subdued conversation as the city's elite gathered for the annual charity gala. At a corner table in the cigar lounge, Theodore Keller held court with 3 other men, their faces flushed from expensive scotch and self-importance. The Shanghai deal closes next week, Theodore was saying. Another $30 million moving through the Cayman account. Scott Levinson, Heritage Trust compliance officer, shifted uncomfortably. We need to discuss the recent Federal Banking Commission inquiries, Theodore. They're asking specific questions about transaction patterns. They always ask questions, Theodore dismissed with a wave. That's why we pay Senator Wilmington's consultation fees. From his position at the bar, Vaughn observed the interaction through the reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. The electronic device in his pocket had been capturing every word of Theodore's conversation for the past 40 minutes. The bartender slid another bourbon toward Vaughn. Compliments of the gentleman at the end of the bar. Vaughn turned, surprised to find Malcolm Reeves, the scarred man from Natalie's party, watching him with cold calculation. Their eyes met, an unspoken challenge passing between them. After a moment, Vaughn picked up his drink and walked over. Bold move, approaching me in public, Vaughn said, taking the seat beside Reeves. Professional courtesy, Reeves replied. One operator to another. I've reviewed your file. Impressive work in Tehran. In Bogota. I'm retired. No one with your skill set truly retires, Mr. Mercer. They just change employers. Reeves sipped his whiskey. You've been making inquiries. Accessing systems you shouldn't. Looking into matters that don't concern you. When someone puts surveillance on my daughter, it becomes my concern. Reeves didn't bother denying it. Insurance. Nothing more. Your ex-wife is valuable to certain interests. By extension, so is the child. You killed Portia Devereux. Let's call an unfortunate business necessity. She became unreliable. Reeves leaned closer. This conversation is a professional courtesy. A warning. Stand down. Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you believe you have, it won't matter. The people I work for exist beyond accountability. Vaughn's expression remained impassive. Is that what you told Portia before you staged your suicide? Something dangerous flashed in Reeves' eyes. Your daughter seems happy with her mother and stepfather. It would be a shame to traumatize her with unnecessary complications. You threatened my daughter again, Vaughn said quietly, and they won't find enough of you to identify. Reeves smirked. Brave words from a man outmatched and outnumbered. He stood, dropping cash on the bar. This is your only warning, Mercer. Next time won't be a conversation. After Reeves departed, Vaughn remained for another 20 minutes, watching Theodore's group break up. When Theodore headed for the restroom, Vaughn followed. The ornate bathroom was empty except for the two of them. Theodore froze when he saw Vaughn's reflection in the mirror. "What the hell are you doing here?" Theodore demanded, turning to face his former son-in-law. "I know about Obsidian," Vaughn said calmly. "I know about the money laundering through Heritage Trust. I know you're planning to disappear with Natalie and my daughter." The color drained from Theodore's face. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Portia Devereux tried to warn me. You had her killed." "I didn't," Theodore began, then caught himself. "Whatever you think you know, you can't prove it. And if you could, you wouldn't be here alone. You'd have brought authorities." "I'm not interested in legal justice," Vaughn replied. "Just justice." "Are you threatening me?" Theodore's indignation barely masked his fear. "I'm promising you this. If you try to take my daughter out of the country, I will dismantle everything you've built. Everyone you care about will watch as you're exposed and ruined." Theodore's shock transformed into cruel amusement. "You still don't get it, do you? Natalie never loved you. You were useful, a security expert with connections and no family complications. She married you on my instruction. Your function was to provide cover and legitimacy while we expanded operations." The revelation landed like a physical blow, but Vaughn's expression remained unchanged. "And Lily, an unfortunate complication. Natalie was supposed to remain childless, but she became attached to the idea of motherhood." Theodore straightened his tie. "You've wasted enough of my time with these melodramatic accusations. Stay away from my family, where the consequences will be severe." As Theodore moved to leave, Vaughn placed a hand on his shoulder. "One last thing." He held up his phone, showing Theodore the active recording. "Your conversation about the Shanghai deal and Senator Wilmington has already been sent to 3 separate secure locations. If anything happens to me or Lily, it goes to the FBI, Interpol, and the Wall Street Journal simultaneously." Theodore's face contorted with rage. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," Vaughn replied. "I'm ending one." Later that night, Scott Levinson, Heritage Trust compliance officer, received an anonymous package containing irrefutable evidence of Theodore Keller's financial crimes, along with details of Obsidian's operations. By morning, he would deliver it all to the Federal Banking Commission, setting in motion the first phase of Vaughn's plan. Meanwhile, in a luxury downtown apartment, Malcolm Reeves discovered his secure personal server had been breached, all files copied and deleted. His offshore accounts were emptied, digital identity erased. On his bathroom mirror, written in his own shaving cream, "First warning." The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. The Hourglass Turns. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds of the safe house apartment as Vaughn reviewed the latest intelligence from his network. Heritage Trust was in chaos. The Federal Banking Commission had arrived unannounced at 8 a.m. with a warrant, and Theodore Keller had been escorted from the building in full view of his employees. It would be hours before he secured bail. The burner phone on the table buzzed. A text from his sister. "Lily's safe. No unusual activity. She misses you." Vaughn allowed himself a moment of relief before refocusing. The clock was ticking. With Theodore detained, Obsidian would accelerate their evacuation plans. He needed to move quickly. The television news played in the background. A reporter standing outside Heritage Trust headquarters. Allegations of extensive money laundering and securities fraud. Sources close to the investigation suggest connections to international arms dealing through a private military contractor. Vaughn's phone buzzed again, this time his primary cell phone, which he kept powered off except for brief checks. 17 missed calls from Natalie, 3 from Bradley, and a voicemail from his attorney. He listened to the attorney's message first. "Vaughn, they filed emergency custody modification papers alleging parental kidnapping. Judge Hanscom granted a temporary order. You need to produce Lily immediately or face criminal charges. Call me." Next came Natalie's latest voicemail, her voice eerily calm. "Vaughn, you've put us in an impossible position. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Bradley and I just want what's best for Lily. Bring her home, and we can talk this through like adults. Please, before this gets any worse. The calculated manipulation in her tone confirmed what Theodore had revealed. Natalie had never been who she pretended to be. The woman he'd loved, the mother of his child, had been a carefully constructed fiction. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. 3 short raps, a pause, then 2 more, the arranged signal. Vaughn checked the peephole before admitting Gabriella Acosta, a former intelligence analyst who now worked as a private investigator. "You look terrible," she observed, setting down her laptop bag. "Sleeping's overrated," Vaughn replied. "What did you find?" "Your ex-wife's been busy," Gabriella said, opening her laptop. "In the past 48 hours, she's liquidated over $2 million in assets and transferred the funds through a series of shell companies. Classic laundering pattern. Destination: final transfer went to an account in the Cayman Islands registered to a company called Blue Horizon Ventures. Obsidian subsidiary, Vaughn noted. They're preparing to run. Gabriella nodded. There's more. Bradley Hoffman, or Preston Rayburn, whatever he's calling himself, has been making calls to a private airfield outside the city. Changed their departure time from Friday to tomorrow night. The accelerated timeline was concerning but not unexpected. With Theodore compromised and Vaughn clearly onto them, they would be desperate to escape. What about Malcolm Reeves? Gabriella's expression turned grim. He's gone completely dark since his accounts were drained. But before he disappeared, he made contact with these 3 individuals. She displayed photos of hard-looking men, former Obsidian operatives, professional hitters. He's assembling a kill team, Vaughn concluded. Most likely. And based on their movement patterns, they're already in the city. Vaughn considered this development. Reeves was dangerous alone. With a team of trained killers, the threat level increased exponentially. "There's one more thing you should see," Gabriella said, pulling up an email thread. "I managed to access Bradley's secure server. These communications between him and Theodore Keller go back 7 years, including detailed discussions of using you for operational cover and exit strategy if things went south." Vaughn scanned the emails, his expression hardening as he read the clinical assessment of his vulnerabilities, the cold calculation of how his security expertise could benefit their operation, how his love for Natalie made him easy to manipulate. One passage stood out with sickening clarity. Mercer's background is perfect, orphaned at 12, minimal family connections, devoted to his career. Once Natalie establishes the relationship, his protective instincts will make him putty in her hands. The marriage needs to last 3 to 5 years minimum for optimal credibility. Vaughn had always believed his orphan status and self-reliance were strengths. These people had seen them as exploitable weaknesses. "They've been planning this for years," he said quietly. "It gets worse," Gabriella replied, showing him another document. "Contingency plans for asset removal if you became problematic. They were prepared to eliminate you from the beginning." The final piece clicked into place. His marriage, his life with Natalie, all of it had been an elaborate cover operation. The only real thing to come from it was Lily, and even she had been viewed as a complication rather than a child. "What's your next move?" Gabriella asked. Vaughn closed the laptop. "I need to see Natalie. Face to face. That's suicide with Reeves hunting you." "I'm counting on it," Vaughn replied. "Give me everything on the private airfield, security layouts, personnel, flight plans. And I need eyes on Bradley. If he moves, I want to know." After Gabriella left, Vaughn prepared for the confrontation ahead. He cleaned his weapon, methodically checked his equipment, and reviewed the intelligence again. The pieces were in place. Now he needed to force his opponents to make their move. He sent a text message to Natalie from a burner phone. "We need to talk. Alone. About Lily's future. Meet me at Westlake Park near the fountain. 3 p.m. Come alone, or I release everything I have to the authorities." The response came within minutes. "I'll be there." Vaughn knew she wouldn't come alone. Bradley would insist on protection, especially with Reeves available. They would see this as an opportunity to eliminate the threat he posed, secure Lily's location, and proceed with their escape plan. It was exactly what he was counting on. At precisely 2:45 p.m., Vaughn entered Westlake Park from the south entrance, keeping to the crowded areas as he made his way toward the fountain. He spotted Natalie immediately, her blonde hair catching the afternoon sun as she sat on a bench, sunglasses concealing her eyes. What she didn't realize was that Vaughn had arrived 90 minutes earlier to position resources and identify the trap they'd set. From his vantage point, he could see the two men in casual clothes positioned at the north and east entrances. A third man sat reading a newspaper on a bench with clear sight lines to Natalie. Malcolm Rees himself would be coordinating from a distance, likely from one of the overlooking buildings. Vaughn approached Natalie from behind, noting how she tensed when she sensed his presence. "Hello, Natalie," he said, taking a seat beside her. "Or should I use your operational designation? Siren, wasn't it? From the Project Odysseus files." She removed her sunglasses, her blue eyes cold and calculating, so different from the warm gaze he'd once loved. "You've been busy, so have you. Liquidating assets, preparing new identities, arranging private transportation. It's not what you think," she said, her voice taking on the concerned tone she'd perfected over their years together. "Theodore's been involved in some questionable business dealings. Bradley and I just found out. We're trying to protect Lily." "Stop lying," Vaughn said quietly. "I know everything. About Obsidian, about your role in the operation, about how you were assigned to marry me as cover." For a moment, Natalie's composure slipped, genuine surprise crossing her features. Then her expression hardened. "Fine. What do you want?" "To understand one thing," Vaughn replied. "Was any of it real? Any moment of our life together?" Natalie hesitated, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "Lily," she finally said. "Lily wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't supposed to get pregnant. But when it happened," she trailed off, "having her change things. But not enough to stop using her as leverage against me." "We do what's necessary to survive," Natalie replied coldly. "Now, where is she?" "Safe. Beyond your reach." Natalie's eyes narrowed. "Reeves will find her. He finds everyone." "Reeves is otherwise occupied," Vaughn said, nodding slightly toward the north entrance where police officers were now approaching one of the surveillance men. "Anonymous tip about an armed suspect. Same for your east entrance coverage." Alarm spread across Natalie's face as she realized the trap had been reversed. "You can't win this, Vaughn. You don't understand the resources aligned against you." "I understand perfectly," Vaughn replied, standing up. "Give Bradley a message for me. Tell him I'm coming for him next." As he walked away, Natalie called after him, "They'll kill you. You can't protect Lily if you're dead." Vaughn didn't look back. Phase 2 of his plan was now in motion. Chapter 6, Betrayal's Price. The private airfield glowed under security lights as evening descended, its perimeter patrolled by armed guards. Not the typical security for a civilian facility. From his observation position in the tree line, Vaughn counted 6 men with military-grade weapons and tactical movement patterns. Definitely Obsidian personnel. His earpiece crackled. "Perimeter sweep approaching your position," warned Gabriella, who was monitoring the security feed she'd hacked. 30 seconds. Vaughn melted deeper into the shadows as 2 guards passed within yards of his location, their conversation drifting through the darkness. "Triple the detail after what happened to Keller," one was saying. "Rayburn's freaking out. Can you blame him? Someone systematically dismantled our entire operation in 72 hours. You think it's really just the ex-husband? Whoever it is, they're good. Too good." Once they passed, Vaughn continued his approach to the hangar where a Gulfstream G650 was being prepared for departure. According to the flight plan Gabriella had obtained, it was scheduled for a 2 a.m. takeoff, destination Sao Paulo, then onward to an undisclosed location. "I have eyes on primary target," Gabriella reported. "Bradley and Natalie just arrived. 2-vehicle convoy, heavily armed escort. Any sign of Reeves?" "Negative, but satellite thermal shows 8, possibly 9 armed individuals inside the main hangar. They're expecting trouble. They were right to expect it, though not in the way they anticipated." Vaughn had no intention of assaulting a fortified position held by former Special Forces operators. He had a different approach in mind. Execute Phase 3, he instructed. Across the city, coordinated events began unfolding. Federal agents raided 3 Obsidian Front companies based on anonymous tips and documented evidence. Local police, acting on similar information, secured Malcolm Reeves' safe house, finding enough illegal weapons to guarantee federal charges. Most significantly, every major news outlet simultaneously received comprehensive files on Obsidian's illegal operations, complete with Bradley Hoffman/Preston Rayburn's involvement and connections to Theodore Keller. The reaction at the airfield was immediate. Vaughn watched through high-powered binoculars as Bradley emerged from the hangar, shouting into his phone. Even from a distance, the panic in his body language was evident. "They're accelerating departure," Gabriella reported, requesting immediate clearance for takeoff. "Right on schedule," Vaughn replied, making his way toward the administrative building at the far end of the airfield. Unlike the hangar, this structure had minimal security, all attention focused on protecting the aircraft and its passengers. Inside, he moved silently through darkened corridors until he reached the communications room. The lone technician never saw him coming, a pressure point at the base of the neck, rendering him unconscious without injury. Vaughn locked the door and accessed the facility's internal systems. Within minutes, he had control of the airfield's communications, security cameras, and most importantly, the fuel management system for the Gulfstream. "All assets in position," came Gabriella's voice in his ear. "Understood. Go dark until extraction." Vaughn initiated the final sequence, triggering a cascading communications failure across the facility. As emergency protocols activated, the security team's attention divided between the perceived external threat and securing their principal's escape. Through the surveillance system, Vaughn watched Bradley and Natalie being hustled toward the waiting aircraft, surrounded by protective detail. Bradley looked shell-shocked, while Natalie maintained her composure, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. Just before they reached the aircraft, federal helicopters appeared over the horizon, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. The timing was perfect, the result of anonymous tips about illegal weapons and human trafficking operations at the supposedly civilian airfield. Chaos erupted below as Obsidian personnel scrambled to respond to the unexpected development. Bradley and Natalie were rushed back toward the vehicles while guards took defensive positions. In the confusion, no one noticed the figure moving through the shadows toward the main hangar. No one except Natalie, who broke away from her security detail and pursued, drawing a concealed weapon from beneath her jacket. Inside the darkened hangar, Vaughn worked quickly, placing small charges at strategic points around the fuel reserves. Not enough to cause catastrophic damage, just sufficient to ensure the aircraft wouldn't be taking anyone to South America tonight or any other night. "I should have known," came Natalie's voice from behind him. "The others underestimated you. I warned them." Vaughn turned slowly to face his ex-wife, noting the 9mm pistol aimed steadily at his chest. "You always were the smarter one. This won't end well for you," Natalie said, maintaining her distance. "Even if you manage to bring down Obsidian, others will take its place. The same people who protected Theodore all these years will find new assets to control." "Maybe," Vaughn acknowledged, "but they won't have my daughter." Something shifted in Natalie's expression, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through her operational facade. "I do love her, Vaughn. Whatever else was false, that never was. And yet you were prepared to take her away forever, to raise her in a world of criminals and killers." "I was protecting her," Natalie insisted. "You don't understand what these people are capable of." "I understand perfectly," Vaughn replied. "That's why I've spent the last 3 days systematically dismantling their entire operation. Bank accounts frozen, identities compromised, safe houses exposed. By morning, there will be nothing left of Obsidian or anyone connected to it." Fear flashed across Natalie's features. "You can't have reached everyone. The organization is too extensive." "I didn't have to," Vaughn said. "I just had to create enough chaos and uncertainty to turn them against each other. The rest is happening on its own. Your father already offered testimony against Bradley in exchange for witness protection. And Bradley, well, The files I sent to the FBI contained enough to ensure he'll spend the rest of his life in a Supermax facility. The distant sound of gunfire erupted outside, federal agents engaging with the Obsidian security team. "It's over," Natalie Vaughn said. "The only question is whether you'll be arrested as an accomplice or eliminated as a liability. Because those are the only options Obsidian's real controllers will leave you." Uncertainty crept into Natalie's eyes. "There's always another option, like shooting me and escaping in the confusion," Vaughn suggested. "It won't work. This entire conversation is being recorded and transmitted to federal authorities. Kill me, and you'll never see Lily again." The mention of their daughter caused Natalie's aim to waver. "Where is she? Is she really safe? Safer than she ever was with you?" Something broke in Natalie then, the calculated operative giving way to a mother's desperation. "I never wanted this for her. You have to believe that. When they told me to target you, to create a relationship as cover, it was just an assignment. I never expected to have a child, to build a life that felt real." Vaughn finished for her. Natalie nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Theodore has controlled my life since I was 17. After my mother died, he brought me into his world piece by piece. By the time I understood what it really was, I was already implicated in too many operations to escape." The gunfire outside intensified, moving closer to the hangar. "You have one chance," Vaughn said, his voice hardening. "Put down the gun and turn yourself in. Cooperate fully with the authorities. If you do that, if you help dismantle what remains of this organization, I'll make sure Lily knows you tried to do the right thing in the end." Natalie's hand trembled, the weapon becoming heavy in her grip. "They'll kill me in custody. Make it look like suicide, just like Portia." "Not if you have leverage," Vaughn countered, removing a flash drive from his pocket. "Names, dates, offshore account for the people above Theodore and Bradley. The ones who really control Obsidian. Insurance to keep you alive." Hope flickered across Natalie's face. "You do that? After everything?" "Not for you," Vaughn clarified. "For Lily. So she'll know her mother wasn't completely lost." The hangar doors crashed open, federal agents flooding in with weapons raised, shouting commands. Natalie looked from them to Vaughn, then slowly lowered her weapon and placed it on the ground. As agents moved to secure her, she locked eyes with Vaughn one last time. "Tell Lily I'm sorry. Tell her." Her voice broke. "Tell her I did love her. That was never a lie." Vaughn watched impassively as Natalie was led away, her words echoing in his mind. Outside, Bradley was already in custody, his face contorted with rage as agents secured him in a transport vehicle. The elaborate criminal enterprise that had destroyed Vaughn's marriage and threatened his daughter was collapsing in real time all around him. Yet victory felt hollow. In dismantling the threat to Lily, he had also demolished the foundations of her life, exposing her mother as a fraud, her grandfather as a criminal, her stepfather as a dangerous operative. The truth, necessary as it was, would leave scars that might never fully heal. As dawn broke over the airfield, Vaughn stood alone amidst the aftermath of his vengeance, the weight of what came next settling heavily upon him. The battle was won, but the war to give Lily a normal life was just beginning. And somewhere in the chaos, Malcolm Reeves had slipped away, the one loose and Vaughn couldn't account for. A dangerous enemy, now driven by personal vendetta rather than professional assignment. The game had changed, but it wasn't over. Chapter 7. Ashes and Shadows. 3 months after the dramatic raid at the airfield, Vaughn sat in the office of Assistant U.S. Attorney Sophia Mendez, reviewing the latest developments in the case against Obsidian Solutions Group and its principals. "Theodore Keller's testimony has been extensive," Mendez said, sliding a file across her desk. "With his cooperation, we've identified 7 other financial institutions involved in laundering Obsidian funds. The investigation has expanded to 3 continents." "And Bradley?" Vaughn asked, using the name he still associated with his daughter's former stepfather, though the man now answered to his real identity, Preston Rayburn. "Refusing to cooperate. His attorneys are pursuing an aggressive defense, claiming he was an unwitting participant manipulated by Keller." Mendez's expression made clear her opinion of this strategy. With the evidence he provided, plus Natalie's testimony, he's facing multiple life sentences regardless. Natalie, even after everything, her name still evoked complicated emotions. She remained in federal custody, her cooperation ensuring protection from both prosecution and the remnants of Obsidian seeking to silence her. Have there been any credible threats against her? Vaughn asked. Mendez nodded grimly. 2 attempts in the first month. We've since moved her to a more secure facility under a different identity. The information she's providing about Obsidian's government contracts has made some very powerful people nervous. Any sign of Malcolm Reeves? Nothing concrete. Intelligence suggests he may have fled to Eastern Europe, but that's unconfirmed. He's resourceful, and now he has a personal vendetta against you. Vaughn had expected as much. Reeves wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, especially such a public and comprehensive one. We can offer you witness protection, Mendez said, not for the first time. You and your daughter, new identities, relocation. Lily needs stability, not another upheaval, Vaughn replied. And I won't spend my life looking over my shoulder. Reeves will surface eventually. When he does, I'll be ready. After leaving the prosecutor's office, Vaughn drove to his sister Renee's suburban home, where Lily had been staying while he established their new life. The custody situation had been resolved definitively in his favor, given Natalie's circumstances, but he knew the emotional wounds would take much longer to heal. He found Lily in the backyard, helping her aunt plant flowers in the garden. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she raced across the lawn to fling herself into his arms. Dad, did you bring it? Did you? Vaughn smiled, the weight of the past months momentarily lifting. Bring what? I don't remember promising anything. Dad, Lily protested, seeing through his teasing. You promised. The puppy. Oh, that? Vaughn said, pretending to suddenly remember. Well, as it happens. He gestured toward his sister, who was walking around the side of the house with a squirming golden retriever puppy in her arms. Lily's squeal of delight was worth every moment of the nightmare they'd endured. As she raced to meet her new companion, Renee approached her brother. You're spoiling her, she observed, though her tone held no criticism. She deserves some joy after everything she's been through, Vaughn replied, watching as Lily and the puppy tumbled together on the grass. How's the new place coming along? Final security installation tomorrow, then we're clear to move in. Renee studied her brother's face. You really think he'll come for you? Reeves, it's not a question of if, only when, Vaughn replied quietly. But I've taken precautions. The new house is as secure as a government facility, with escape routes and panic rooms. I've engaged round-the-clock surveillance. When he makes his move, we'll be ready. And Lily? How much does she understand about what happened? Vaughn sighed. The child psychologist said to be honest but age-appropriate. She knows her mother did some bad things and is helping the police now. She knows Bradley wasn't who he pretended to be. The rest we'll address when she's older. The conversation paused as Lily ran over to show them how the puppy already knew how to sit on command. After she returned to playing, Renee spoke again. And Natalie? Will Lily ever see her again? That's up to the federal marshals and witness security, Vaughn replied. And ultimately, it will be Lily's decision when she's old enough to make it. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed at Renee's house, Vaughn drove to the new home he'd purchased, a modernist structure on a hilltop with clear sight lines in all directions. The extensive security system alerted him to a potential intrusion at the perimeter, but verification showed only a deer passing through the wooded area behind the property. Inside, he checked each room methodically, a habit from his years in high-risk security work. The house was empty, yet he couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Intuition or paranoia. In his line of work, the difference had often meant survival. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She has her eyes. Central Park Playground. Yellow jacket. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Vaughn's blood ran cold. Attached was a photo of Lily at her school, taken earlier that day. He immediately called his surveillance team, demanding to know how someone had gotten close enough for the photo. Their confusion and assurances that the school perimeter had been secure offered no comfort. The message could only have come from Malcolm Reeves. Somehow, despite all precautions, he had reached Lily's school. The implied threat was clear: I can get to her anytime. Vaughn considered his options. The specified meeting was obviously a trap, yet ignoring it would only embolden Reeves. Reporting it to federal authorities would trigger protective measures that might drive Reeves deeper underground without neutralizing the threat. No, this would end only one way: a direct confrontation on terms Vaughn could control. He would attend the meeting, but not in the way Reeves expected. Over the next 3 days, Vaughn made meticulous preparations. Lily and Renee were relocated to a secure facility known only to him. His most trusted former colleagues were positioned strategically around Central Park, creating an invisible security net. Every possible ambush point was identified and countered. When Tuesday arrived, Vaughn approached the playground from an unexpected direction, having altered his appearance with subtle but effective changes. From his position, he had clear sight lines to the playground where children played under parents' watchful eyes. At precisely 3 p.m., a man in a yellow jacket sat on a bench facing the playground. Not Reeves. His build and movement patterns were wrong. A proxy sent to make initial contact or confirm Vaughn's presence. Through his earpiece, Vaughn received confirmation from his team: Yellow Jacket is clean. No weapons. Carrying a mobile phone and what appears to be an envelope, Vaughn approached cautiously, taking a seat beside the man while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. He said you'd come, the man said without looking at Vaughn. Said you wouldn't risk your daughter. Where is he? Not here. The man slid the envelope across the bench. He said to give you this. Said it explains everything. As Vaughn reached for the envelope, his instincts screamed a warning. He pulled back just as the man's hand moved to his pocket with unnatural speed. The next moments unfolded in horrifying clarity. Vaughn knocked the man's arm aside as he withdrew not a weapon, but a syringe. The momentum carried the needle into the man's own thigh, and his eyes widened in shock and terror. Help! The man gasped, his face already contorting. He said it wouldn't hurt you. Said it was just to make you sleep. Within seconds, the man began convulsing, drawing screams from nearby parents who grabbed their children and fled. Vaughn's security team converged, establishing a perimeter as the man's body went rigid, then still. The entire incident had been orchestrated not to kill Vaughn, but to send a message and to eliminate the messenger, leaving no connection to Reeves. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Natalie in her witness protection location, reading a newspaper with yesterday's date clearly visible. Scrawled across the image were the words, "She's next. Then you. Then Lily will be alone. Just like you were." The reference to Vaughn's orphan childhood confirmed Reeves had accessed his complete background. This wasn't just revenge. It was psychological warfare designed to systematically destroy everything Vaughn valued before coming for him directly. As federal authorities took over the scene, Vaughn stepped away, making a call to Assistant U.S. Attorney Mendez. Reeves has compromised Natalie's location, he said without preamble. Move her immediately. Full security protocol. How could he possibly? He has sources inside your operation. Vaughn cut her off. Someone with access to witness security. Trust no one until you identify the leak. After ending the call, Vaughn made a decision. Defensive measures were no longer sufficient. To protect Lily and end this threat permanently, he would need to take the fight directly to Malcolm Reeves, wherever he was hiding. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Chapter 8. Predator and Prey. The abandoned steel mill stood silhouetted against the night sky, its skeletal structure a monument to industrial decay. Rain pelted the rusted metal, creating an eerie percussion that masked Vaughn's approach through the surrounding wetlands. 72 hours of relentless pursuit had led to this moment. After the Central Park incident, Vaughn had activated a network of contacts stretching from former intelligence operatives to underground information brokers. The trail had led first to a safe house in Newark, then to a money transfer in Philadelphia, and finally to this desolate location 20 miles outside Pittsburgh. According to his intelligence, Malcolm Reeves had established a temporary base of operations here, gathering resources and personnel for what would likely be his endgame move against Vaughn and potentially Natalie. Thermal imaging from a drone pass had confirmed 4 heat signatures inside the main structure. One stationary in what had once been the administrative office, the others patrolling in rotating patterns. Security cameras had been positioned at strategic points around the perimeter, but the recent storm had created power fluctuations that Vaughn could exploit. He approached the east access point during a calculated power dip, using the momentary camera blindness to breach the outer fence. Inside the complex, he moved like a ghost between massive, rusting machinery, his progress deliberate and unhurried. Rushing would create mistakes, and against an opponent like Reeves, a single mistake would be fatal. The first sentry fell silently, a precise sleeper hold rendering him unconscious before he could alert his companions. Vaughn zip-tied the man's hands and feet, then secured him in a drainage culvert, alive but contained. The second guard proved more challenging, his movement pattern less predictable than initial surveillance had suggested. Vaughn was forced to remain motionless behind a collapsed conveyor belt for 18 minutes, rain soaking through his tactical gear, before an opportunity presented itself. Again, he opted for non-lethal neutralization, a decision that wasn't born of mercy but calculation. Bodies created complications and investigations. Unconscious guards could be questioned later. As he approached the administrative building, Vaughn detected the faint blue glow of electronics through the grime-covered windows. Reeves would have established a command center, likely with surveillance feeds and communications equipment. The third guard would be positioned to protect this resource. Rather than risk a frontal approach, Vaughn circled to the roof access, using the external fire escape that groaned treacherously under his weight. The sound was mostly masked by the continuing storm, but he froze when lightning illuminated the area, making him potentially visible to anyone watching. No alarm was raised. He continued to the roof and located the access hatch, carefully testing it for booby traps before proceeding. The interior was pitch black, requiring night vision to navigate the maze of collapsed ceiling panels and rotting office furniture. Below, he could hear voices, a low murmur that suggested at least 2 individuals in conversation. He positioned himself above a ceiling vent that offered both visual and auditory intelligence. Confirmed the leak has been identified and neutralized, a voice was saying, "Not Reeves, but someone reporting to him. Federal marshals have moved the woman to a new location. We've lost that track for now." "It doesn't matter," came Reeves' distinctive voice, cold and precise. "Mercer is the priority. Once he's eliminated, we can locate the woman and the child at our leisure. The team from Belgrade arrives tomorrow. 6 operators, fully equipped." "We don't wait," Reeves replied. "Mercer's already hunting us. He's proven more resourceful than anticipated. You think he's found this location?" A pause. "It's possible. Enhance perimeter surveillance and activate the secondary security protocols." Vaughn had heard enough. Reeves was expanding his operation, bringing in additional mercenaries for what appeared to be a major offensive. The timetable had accelerated. He needed to end this now, before reinforcements arrived. Moving silently along the ceiling joists, he positioned himself above what appeared to be Reeves' command center. Through gaps in the deteriorating ceiling, he could see computer equipment, weapons, and tactical gear. Reeves sat at a central desk, studying something on a monitor, while his subordinate, a younger man with military bearing, checked surveillance feeds on a separate screen. Vaughn considered his options. A direct assault would be high risk, especially if Reeves had prepared contingencies. But allowing him to continue gathering resources would only make the eventual confrontation more dangerous. The decision was made for him when an alarm suddenly blared from the younger man's console. "Perimeter breach, south quadrant," he reported, reaching for a weapon. Thermal imaging shows a single intruder. On the surveillance screen, Vaughn could see a figure moving through the complex, a deliberate distraction created by one of his own team members right on schedule. "Hendricks, investigate," Reeves ordered. "Maintain communication." Could be local scavengers, could be something else. As the younger man exited, Vaughn prepared to make his move. Reeves, now alone, activated additional security measures, his attention divided between surveillance feeds and what appeared to be evacuation preparations. The ceiling gave way with a controlled crash as Vaughn dropped into the room, landing in a combat-ready stance with his weapon trained on Reeves, who showed no surprise at the intrusion. Calculated risk, Reeves commented, slowly raising his hands. Entering the lion's den directly. Enter the line, Reeves, Vaughn replied, keeping a safe distance. Your operation is compromised. Federal tactical teams are en route. Are they? Reeves smiled thinly. Or are you here alone, driven by personal vendetta rather than professional judgment? The Vaughn Mercer I studied wouldn't risk a sanctioned operation with his daughter's safety at stake. The Vaughn Mercer you studied doesn't exist anymore, Vaughn replied coldly. You in Obsidian saw to that when you destroyed my life and threatened my child. Reeves gave a small shrug. Collateral damage in a larger operation. Nothing personal until you made it so. Sending assassins after my daughter made it personal. Insurance policy, Reeves corrected. A rational strategy you would have employed in my position. We're not so different, you and I. Both trained to assess threats and eliminate them efficiently. The difference, Vaughn said, is that I don't target children. A tense silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of the alarm still blaring across the complex. What's your endgame here, Mercer? Reeves finally asked. Kill me? Turn me over to authorities? Neither resolves your situation. There are others who will continue what I started. People who consider your knowledge of Obsidian operations an unacceptable liability. I've already dismantled Obsidian, Vaughn replied. Your principals are under indictment or in witness protection. Your offshore accounts are frozen. There's nothing left to protect. Something shifted in Reeves' expression, the first hint of genuine emotion breaking through his professional facade. There's always something left. Always loose ends to eliminate. That's why we're both here, isn't it? To tie up the final loose end in this operation. The radio on Reeves' desk crackled. No sign of the intruder. Possible false alarm from wildlife. Continuing perimeter sweep. Reeves' gaze flickered briefly toward the desk, a momentary tell that Vaughn recognized from years of high-stakes confrontations. There was something on that desk beyond the radio, something Reeves considered a potential game-changer. Hands on your head, Vaughn commanded, moving to secure Reeves while maintaining awareness of potential threats. Kneel, facing away from the desk. Reeves complied with deliberate slowness. You're making a mistake, Mercer. I'm offering you a way out. For you and your daughter. A permanent resolution. The only resolution is ending the threat you pose, Vaughn replied, securing Reeves' hands behind his back with reinforced zip ties. Whatever you're planning dies here. Once Reeves was restrained, Vaughn approached the desk cautiously, keeping his weapon trained on his prisoner. What he found sent a chill through him, detailed surveillance photos of Lily at her new school, at Renee's house, even in the supposedly secure facility where he'd relocated them. More disturbing were architectural plans of the building, with security systems marked and potential entry points highlighted. How did you get these? Vaughn demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. Professional courtesy, Reeves replied with a cold smile. A demonstration of capability. Those photos were taken this morning. Your security measures have already been compromised. My team has established access protocols for when the moment comes. What moment? When I give the order, Reeves said simply, or when I fail to check in at designated intervals. Dead man switch, Mercer. Standard contingency planning. Kill me, imprison me. Either way, protocols activate. Vaughn felt the familiar ice of combat clarity settling over him. If Reeves was telling the truth, and his operational history suggested he would have such contingencies, then simply neutralizing him wouldn't resolve the threat to Lily. What do you want? Vaughn asked, already knowing the answer. Professional resolution, Reeves replied. You disappear permanently. No further pursuit of Obsidian interests or personnel. In exchange, your daughter lives undisturbed. And I'm supposed to trust your word? Trust operational logic, Reeves countered. With you gone, your daughter presents no intelligence risk. Eliminating her creates complications without strategic benefit. My principals are pragmatists, not sadists. The building suddenly shook with an explosion from the south perimeter, Vaughn's extraction team creating a diversion as planned. Alarms blared with renewed urgency. Reeves remained unnaturally calm. Limited time frame now, Mercer. Decision point. Your life for your daughter's safety. The offer expires when reinforcements arrive, for either of us. In the flickering emergency lights, Vaughn studied the man who had become his nemesis. Reeves was a professional, ruthless but rational. If he gave his word on operational grounds, he would likely keep it, if only because breaking it would be inefficient. But there was something in Reeves' eyes, a calculating anticipation that triggered Vaughn's instincts. This was too convenient, too neat a resolution. Show me the dead man's switch, Vaughn demanded. Prove it exists. Reeves nodded toward a laptop on the side table. Access code is Theta 97 Victor. Check the automated protocols folder. Maintaining his weapon's aim, Vaughn accessed the system, finding exactly what Reeves had described. A sophisticated protocol requiring regular authentication to prevent automated execution of pre-programmed commands. The target coordinates matched Lily's location. What Reeves couldn't know was that Vaughn had already moved Lily again after detecting unexplained surveillance activity near the secure facility. The coordinates targeted an empty location. Satisfied? Reeves asked. Almost, Vaughn replied, closing the laptop. One more thing. Without warning, he struck Reeves with precise force at the base of the skull, rendering him unconscious. Working quickly, he accessed Reeves' communication devices, downloading all data to an encrypted drive. The information would allow him to identify and neutralize the remaining threats in Reeves' network. The building shook with another explosion, closer this time. Extraction was imminent. Vaughn looked down at Reeves' unconscious form, considering his options. Killing him would be the simplest solution, permanent elimination of the threat. But it would also mean crossing a line Vaughn had maintained throughout his career, even during the darkest operations. Instead, he placed an anonymous call to federal authorities, providing the location and evidence of Reeves' activities. Obsidian was already under federal investigation. Its head of security would face justice through legal channels. Before departing, Vaughn left a single item beside Reeves, a chess piece. A black king toppled on its side, the universal symbol of checkmate. As extraction helicopters approached, Vaughn disappeared into the night, carrying with him the means to end the threat to his daughter once and for all. The predator had become the prey, and the hunt was finally over. Chapter 9. Unforgiving. 1 year later, Vaughn stood on the deck of his new home in northern Michigan, watching as Lily played with her dog in the sprawling yard that sloped down to a private lake. Autumn had painted the surrounding forests in brilliant red and gold, creating a postcard-perfect setting that seemed worlds away from the darkness they'd escaped. The final dismantling of Malcolm Reeves' network had taken months of meticulous work. The data extracted from his systems had revealed a complex web of operatives, safe houses, and contingency plans, all of which Vaughn had systematically neutralized with the reluctant assistance of federal authorities. Reeves himself had been sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, his trial conducted under unusual security measures given the sensitive nature of Obsidian's government connections. Theodore Keller had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his comprehensive testimony, while Bradley/Preston faced multiple consecutive life terms. Natalie remained in witness protection, her cooperation continuing to unravel the international aspects of Obsidian's operations. According to Mendez, she asked about Lily regularly, though no direct contact had been established. That decision remained in Vaughn's hands, and so far, he had chosen to maintain distance, not out of cruelty, but concern for Lily's emotional well-being. The child psychologist had advised a gradual approach to reintroducing Natalie into Lily's life, if at all. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted his thoughts. A government-issue SUV approached along the private drive, parking near the front entrance. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mendez emerged, looking more casual than Vaughn had ever seen her in jeans and a light jacket. "Mr. Mercer," she greeted him as he came around from the deck. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You said it was important," Vaughn replied, leading her inside the house where Lily couldn't overhear. Has something happened with Reeves? Not Reeves, Mendez said, accepting the coffee he offered. Natalie. She's been insisting on seeing Lily, becoming quite adamant about it. Vaughn's expression hardened. The court granted me sole custody with visitation at my discretion. Nothing has changed. Legally, no, Mendez agreed. But she's making formal requests through official channels now. Given her continued cooperation, some in the Justice Department are sympathetic. And you? Mendez sighed. I'm here as a courtesy, Vaughn, to warn you that pressure may be coming. Natalie has powerful advocates now. People who see her as instrumental in bringing down a significant national security threat. She was part of that threat, Vaughn reminded her. She helped create it, under duress, according to her testimony. The coercion angle has gained traction with the courts. Vaughn stared out the window at Lily, considering the implications. What does she want exactly? Supervised visitation to start. Eventually, shared custody once her situation stabilizes. No, the word was simple, final. She forfeited that right when she planned to disappear with Lily as part of a criminal enterprise, when she allowed my daughter to be used as leverage in their operations. She claimed she was protecting Lily from worse alternatives, Mendez said, that Theodore threatened both of them if she didn't comply with his plans. And her initial targeting of me, her false marriage, was that protection too? Mendez had no answer for that. I need you to understand something, Vaughn continued, his voice quiet but intense. I've forgiven many things in my life. Betrayals, injuries, even attempts on my life. But I will never, never forgive anyone who endangers my child. Natalie crossed that line. So did Theodore. So did Bradley. There is no coming back from that. The courts may not see it that way, Mendez warned. They tend to favor maternal relationships when possible. Let me be perfectly clear, Vaughn said, leaning forward. If the courts attempt to force this issue, I will release everything I have on Obsidian's government connections. Every contract, every operation, every official who looked the other way. The complete data set that I extracted from Reeves systems, but never fully disclosed to your department. Mendez paled slightly. That would compromise ongoing cases, jeopardize national security. Then I suggest you make that clear to whoever is advocating for Natalie, Vaughn replied. My priority is my daughter's safety and well-being. Nothing else matters. After Mendez departed, Vaughn remained in his study, reviewing the extensive security measures that protected their new home. The property was registered under a corporate entity with no connection to his name. Their electronic footprint was minimal, their movements unpredictable. He had created a fortress, not of walls and alarms, but of anonymity and strategic precaution. Lily's laughter drifted through the open window as she played with her friend from the neighboring property, the first real friendship she developed since the upheaval. The child psychologist had reported significant progress in her emotional recovery, noting that the stability of their new life was helping her process the traumatic events of the past. That evening, as he tucked Lily into bed, she asked the question she occasionally revisited. Dad, will I ever see Mom again? Vaughn sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. Your mom is still helping the police with some very important work. It makes it difficult for her to visit right now. But someday, when you're older, you'll have choices about that, he said truthfully. And I'll support whatever you decide. Lily considered this, her young face thoughtful. Bradley wasn't a good person, was he? No, he wasn't. And Grandpa Theodore? Vaughn sighed. He made some very bad decisions that hurt a lot of people. What about Mom? Did she make bad decisions too? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications beyond Lily's understanding. Vaughn had promised never to lie to his daughter, even when the truth was difficult. Yes, he said finally. She did, but she's trying to make better ones now. This seemed to satisfy Lily, who nodded solemnly before changing the subject to her upcoming science project. After finishing their bedtime routine, Vaughn kissed her forehead and turned out the light, leaving the door slightly ajar, as she preferred. In his study, he opened the secure laptop that maintained his monitoring systems. The regular status reports from his security team showed no unusual activity around their perimeter or in the digital surveillance of potential threats. Natalie remained at her witness protection location in Arizona. Malcolm Reeves remained in maximum security at ADX Florence. Theodore Keller was serving his reduced sentence at a medium security facility in Pennsylvania. The final screen showed a real-time location ping from Bradley/Preston's prison transport, currently en route to a federal courthouse for an appeal hearing. The tracking device had been planted by one of Vaughn's contacts in the Marshal's Service, providing an extra layer of security that official channels wouldn't offer. As he was about to close the laptop, an alert flashed on the screen, an unexpected deviation in the transport route. The vehicle had turned onto a secondary road, away from the designated secure path to the courthouse. Vaughn immediately activated enhanced tracking, watching as the transport continued along isolated country roads. This wasn't a standard route change. It was completely off protocol. He made a quick call to his contact in the Marshal's Service, who promised to investigate immediately. Within minutes, the response came back. No authorized route change had been logged. The transport wasn't responding to communication attempts. Vaughn watched the tracking screen with growing apprehension as the transport came to a stop in a remote area. The signal remained stationary for 17 minutes, then began moving again, but at a much higher speed and in the opposite direction. An hour later, the news broke across emergency channels. A federal prisoner transport had been attacked by unknown assailants. 2 marshals dead. The prisoner, Preston Rayburn, formerly known as Bradley Hoffman, missing and presumed extracted by the attackers. Vaughn's security protocols activated automatically. Additional personnel deployed to the perimeter of his property. Surveillance drones launched to monitor the surrounding area. Evacuation vehicles prepared for immediate departure if necessary. But even as these measures unfolded, Vaughn knew they were likely unnecessary. This wasn't about him or Lily, not directly. This was about Obsidian protecting its interests. Bradley/Preston knew too much, had been too deeply embedded in their operations. His testimony, should he choose to provide it, could implicate figures far beyond those already exposed. His extraction wasn't an attack on Vaughn. It was damage control by powers that remained in the shadows. Still, prudence demanded preparation. Vaughn sent a coded message to Renee, activating their emergency protocols. Within 30 minutes, she arrived to stay with Lily while he addressed the potential threat. "Is it happening again?" Renee asked quietly as they stood in the kitchen, out of Lily's earshot. "Precautionary measures only," Vaughn assured her. "I don't believe we're targeted, but I need to verify." For the next 3 days, Vaughn worked tirelessly, leveraging every contact and resource to track Bradley/Preston's extraction team. The trail led through 3 states before going cold at a private airfield in New Mexico, a familiar pattern suggesting the same networks that had nearly helped Natalie and Bradley escape a year earlier. Analysis of communication patterns and financial transactions confirmed his initial assessment. This was an internal Obsidian matter. Bradley had been extracted not to pursue vengeance against Vaughn, but to prevent further exposure of Obsidian's government connections. As the immediate threat assessment downgraded, Vaughn maintained enhanced security but allowed life to return to relative normalcy. Lily resumed school, their daily routines continued, and the autumn days passed in a rhythm that offered healing and stability. 2 weeks after Bradley's extraction, Vaughn received an encrypted message from a source deep within federal intelligence circles. Rayburn terminated. Obsidian protocols. File closed. The message confirmed what Vaughn had suspected. Bradley had been eliminated by his own organization, a loose end tied permanently. The threat he might have posed, either as a witness or as an enemy, was neutralized. That evening, as Lily recounted her day's adventures over dinner, Vaughn found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The facade of his marriage had crumbled, revealing a complex conspiracy that had nearly destroyed everything he valued. Yet from those ashes, he had forged something new, a life defined not by deception, but by clarity of purpose and unyielding protective resolve. He had never been a forgiving man. Those who betrayed him, who threatened what he loved, found no mercy in his response. Natalie had discovered this truth. Theodore had learned it from his prison cell. Bradley had understood it in his final moments, executed by the very organization he had served. And should anyone else ever threaten Lily's safety or happiness, they would discover the same immutable fact. Von Mercer's vengeance was as patient as it was absolute, as methodical as it was merciless. But for now, listening to his daughter's laughter echoing through their home, Von allowed himself to embrace the peace they had earned. The demons had been vanquished, the shadows dispelled. The future stretched before them, not unmarked by the past, but no longer defined by it. In this moment, at least they were safe. And for Von Mercer, unforgiving protector, ruthless advocate, devoted father, that was enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Wesley Garcia stood at his kitchen window, watching his 9-year-old daughter Emma chase their golden retriever around the backyard. The morning sun cast long shadows across their manicured lawn in suburban Colorado, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. He'd built this life brick by brick. The successful construction company, the beautiful home, the family that neighbors envied. Coffee's getting cold. Monique called from behind him, her voice carrying that familiar edge that had grown sharper over the past year. Wesley turned to face his wife of 12 years. At 34, Monique still turned heads with her striking features and carefully maintained figure. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place even at 7 in the morning. But Wesley had learned to read the subtle signs, the tightness around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders when she was planning something. Thanks, babe. He accepted the mug, noting how she avoided his touch. You seem excited about today's adventure. Monique's smile didn't reach her eyes. Emma's been begging to explore those caves for months. I figure it was time. She paused, studying his face. You don't mind us going without you? You know I trust you with her completely. The words felt heavy on his tongue. Once that trust had been absolute. Now, something nagged at him. A contractor's instinct for structural weakness that had served him well in business. Emma burst through the back door, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Daddy, Mommy says we're going to be real explorers today. Wesley scooped her up, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. You listen to your mom, okay? And stay safe. I will. Mommy packed the coolest flashlight. It's super bright. Over Emma's head, Wesley caught Monique watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. For 12 years, he'd thought he knew every expression that crossed his wife's face. Now he wondered what else he'd missed. After breakfast, Wesley helped load their gear into Monique's SUV. 2 backpacks, water bottles, energy bars, and a heavy-duty flashlight that had cost him nearly $200. Everything looked standard for a day of cave exploration. The weather report looks good, he said, double-checking the straps on Emma's pack. Should be perfect conditions. Perfect, Monique echoed, though something in her tone made Wesley glance up sharply. But she was already climbing into the driver's seat, her expression neutral. Emma hugged him tight before buckling into her booster seat. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, sweetheart. Take lots of pictures. As Wesley watched them drive away, the feeling in his gut intensified. He'd survived 2 decades in construction by trusting his instincts about people and situations. Right now, those instincts were screaming. He spent the morning reviewing blueprints for a new commercial project, but couldn't concentrate. Finally, he called his foreman, Brandon Barker, and told him to handle the site inspection alone. Brandon had been his right hand for 8 years and could run the company in his sleep. You feeling all right, Wes? Brandon's gravelly voice carried concern. You never take Saturdays off. Just want to be available if the girls need anything. Wesley rubbed his temples. They're exploring some caves up in the mountains. Those caves can be tricky. My cousin got lost up there last summer. Took search and rescue 6 hours to find him. The words hit Wesley like a punch to the gut. Which caves? The whole network up past Miller's Peak. Lot of unmapped passages. What? Wesley was already reaching for his keys. I'll call you back. The drive to the mountains took 45 minutes, and with each mile, Wesley's unease grew. He proposed to Monique at Miller's Peak 7 years ago. She knew these trails better than anyone. So why hadn't she mentioned the caves were dangerous? He parked at the trailhead where Monique's SUV sat empty, doors unlocked. Inside, he found Emma's favorite stuffed elephant, the one she never left behind on important adventures. His blood ran cold. Wesley had made it halfway up the main trail when his phone rang. Chapter 2, The Call. Daddy. Emma's voice was small and echoing, as if she were speaking from inside a tunnel. Emma. Sweetheart, where are you? We're in the cave, but something's wrong. Mommy broke my flashlight. She said it was an accident, but Emma's voice wavered. Daddy, she's putting rocks by the entrance. Big ones. I can't move them. Wesley's world tilted. What do you mean she's blocking the entrance? She told me to call you. She said to tell you. Emma's voice broke into sobs. Daddy, I'm scared. It's getting dark, and I can't see very good. Emma, listen to me. I'm coming to get you, okay? Can you see any light? Any way out? There's a little crack, but it's too small. Mommy said she had to fix something she should have done a long time ago. What did she mean, Daddy? Wesley was already running back toward his truck. Don't worry about that now. Just stay exactly where you are. Keep talking to me. But the line went dead. With shaking hands, Wesley called Monique. She answered on the first ring. Having a nice Saturday? Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. Monique, what the hell are you doing? Let Emma out of there right now. I should have done it 9 years ago. The words were delivered with chilling matter-of-factness. But I was weak then. I thought I could make it work. Done what 9 years ago. Monique, Emma is your daughter. A bitter laugh. Is she, Wesley? Really? The implication hit him like a sledgehammer. Wesley had to pull over as the world spun around him. What are you talking about? Check your math, genius. Emma was born exactly 7 months after our wedding. You remember Harvey Christian, don't you? Your old business partner. Harvey Christian. The name brought back a flood of memories. The man who'd helped Wesley start his construction company, then disappeared with $50,000 in Wesley's trust. The man whose betrayal had nearly destroyed everything Wesley had worked for. He came to me before the wedding, Monique continued. Told me he loved me. Wanted me to run away with him. I chose you instead. Such a stable choice. Such a good provider. Wesley's mind raced. Harvey had vanished 10 years ago, just months before Emma was born. He'd always assumed the timing was coincidental. But Emma looks like me, he whispered. Does she? Or have you just been seeing what you wanted to see? Images flashed through Wesley's mind. Emma's green eyes, so different from his brown ones or Monique's blue. Her delicate bone structure. The way she moved, nothing like his own solid, practical frame. Even if that's true, Wesley said, forcing strength into his voice, she's still my daughter. I raised her. I love her. I know. That's what makes this so perfect. The line went dead. Wesley immediately called 911, then Mountain Rescue. Within an hour, the mountainside swarmed with emergency personnel. Wesley led them to the cave entrance, where they found a wall of carefully placed rocks sealing the opening. Professionally done, observed Colin Holmes, the rescue team leader. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. This is going to take hours to clear safely. As night fell, Wesley paced the command post like a caged animal. Search teams had found Monique's body at the bottom of a ravine 2 miles away, an apparent fall while hiking alone. The official story was already forming. Tragic accident, grieving mother, heartbroken family. Only Wesley knew the truth. At 11:47 p.m., Colin Holmes approached him with an expression Wesley would never forget. We've cleared the entrance, Holmes said quietly. We found your wife. Wesley's heart leaped. And Emma? Holmes looked away. I'm sorry, sir. But your daughter, she's no more. The world went silent. Wesley felt something inside him break. Not just break, but shatter into 1,000 jagged pieces that would never fit back together. But as he stood there, surrounded by the concerned faces of rescue workers and the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, one thought crystallized in his mind with absolute clarity. This wasn't over. Chapter 3. The Investigation. The funeral was held on a Tuesday in October. Wesley stood at the graveside, dry-eyed and hollow, accepting condolences from neighbors who had no idea what really happened. Emma's small white coffin disappeared into the earth, taking with it the last innocent piece of his heart. Monique's coffin sat beside it. Wesley had insisted on the joint service, not out of love, but because it fit the narrative everyone expected. The grieving widower, burying his wife and daughter together after a terrible accident. "I'm so sorry for your loss," said Susan Nelson, their neighbor. Monique was such a devoted mother. Wesley nodded numbly. If only she knew. 3 weeks later, Wesley sat in the office of Ronald Lee, the best private investigator in Colorado. Lee was a former FBI agent with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I need you to investigate my wife's death," Wesley said without preamble. Lee raised an eyebrow. The police ruled it accidental. Mountain Rescue confirmed the sequence of events. "What makes you think otherwise?" Wesley had been preparing for this question. "My wife was an expert hiker. She knew those mountains better than anyone. She doesn't just fall off a cliff. Grief can make us look for explanations where there aren't any. She murdered my daughter." The words came out flat and hard. "I need you to prove it." Lee studied him for a long moment. "That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have?" Wesley had spent weeks thinking about this. He couldn't reveal Emma's phone call without incriminating himself. Why hadn't he called rescue immediately? Why had he driven to the mountains first? Any lawyer would tear apart his timeline. "Start with Harvey Christian," Wesley said instead. "He was my business partner 10 years ago. He disappeared around the time Emma was born. You think there's a connection? I think my wife had secrets. I want to know what they were." Lee's fee was expensive, but Wesley didn't care. Money had lost all meaning. He authorized a comprehensive investigation into Monique's life, her communications, her financial records, everything. While Lee worked, Wesley threw himself into planning. He'd built a successful business by thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else. This would be no different. First, he needed to understand exactly what Monique had done. The official story was that she'd gone hiking alone after securing Emma safely in a cave chamber, planning to return with additional equipment. She'd fallen to her death, and by the time rescue arrived, Emma had succumbed to exposure and dehydration. The timeline supported this narrative. Monique's body had been found hours before the cave was fully cleared. Emma's final phone call to him had been explained as a brief moment when cell service reached into the cave before cutting out entirely. But Wesley knew better. He'd heard the terror in Emma's voice, the deliberate cruelty in Monique's. This hadn't been a hiking accident. It was calculated murder designed to look like a tragic mishap. The question was why. 2 weeks later, Lee called with his first report. "Found your Harvey Christian. He's been living in Arizona under the name Harvey Clark. Runs a small construction company in Tucson. Is he Emma's father?" DNA would confirm it, but circumstantially, it's possible. He left Colorado exactly 9 months before Emma was born. "Wanting to make contact?" "Not yet. Keep digging." Lee's second report was more illuminating. "Your wife was in contact with someone in Arizona for the past year. Encrypted messaging app, but I was able to trace the general location. Same city where Harvey Christian is living." Wesley felt the pieces clicking together. What were they planning? "Still working on that. But I found something else interesting. Your wife had a life insurance policy you don't know about. $2 million, purchased 18 months ago. The beneficiary isn't you. Who? A trust fund for Emma Garcia. But here's the kicker. If Emma predeceases the policyholder, the money goes to a secondary beneficiary. Want to guess who?" Wesley's blood ran cold. "Harvey Christian. Bingo. But there's more. Your wife also had a substantial debt you don't know about. Gambling addiction, looks like. She owed some very serious people in Denver about $300,000. The picture was becoming clearer. Monique had been planning this for months, possibly years. The insurance policy, the secret communications with Harvey, the mounting debt. It all pointed to a woman desperate enough to murder her own child for money. But Wesley still needed proof. And more importantly, he needed Harvey Christian. "I want you to keep monitoring Harvey," Wesley told Lee. "But don't approach him yet. I need more information first." "What kind of information?" Wesley smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a pleasant smile, the kind that will destroy him. That night, Wesley sat in Emma's room, surrounded by her toys and drawings. On her desk was a picture she'd drawn of their family, stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. She'd labeled each figure in careful block letters, "Daddy, Mommy, me." But now Wesley noticed something he'd missed before. In the drawing, the figure labeled Mommy stood slightly apart from the other two, her stick arms reaching not toward her family, but toward something off the edge of the paper. Even a 9-year-old had sensed the distance. Wesley carefully folded the drawing and put it in his wallet. Then he opened his laptop and began researching everything he could about Harvey Christian, gambling debts, and how to destroy someone's life so completely they'd beg for mercy. He had time, he had money, and now he had purpose. Harvey Christian had helped Monique murder Emma for insurance money. Now, Wesley was going to show them both what real planning looked like. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. 3 months after the funeral, Wesley Garcia looked nothing like the man who had buried his wife and daughter. He'd lost 30 pounds, traded his comfortable jeans and flannel shirts for sharp business suits, and developed the lean, predatory look of someone who'd learned to hunt. His construction company continued running smoothly under Brandon Barker's management, generating the steady income Wesley needed for his real work. Because make no mistake, hunting Harvey Christian had become his full-time job. Ronald Lee's investigation had uncovered a web of deceit that went back years. Harvey hadn't just stolen $50,000 when he disappeared. He'd been systematically embezzling from their joint accounts for months before vanishing. The total theft was closer to $200,000. Money Wesley had assumed was lost to bad investments and market fluctuations. But the real revelation was Harvey's pattern. This wasn't his first time. "He's done this before," Lee explained during their weekly meeting. "At least 3 other times in different states. Establishes a business partnership, gains trust, then disappears with whatever he can steal. Classic long-term con artist." Wesley studied the files spread across Lee's desk. What about the other partners? 2 went bankrupt. 1 committed suicide. Lee's expression was grim. "Your Harvey Christian leaves bodies in his wake." "Not Harvey Christian anymore. You said he goes by Harvey Clark now." "Complete identity change. Social security number, driver's license, the works. Professional job. This isn't his first reinvention." Wesley leaned back in his chair, thinking. So Monique wasn't his first victim either. Probably not. I've traced communications between them going back almost 2 years. She wasn't just planning to cash in the insurance money. She was planning to disappear with him afterward. Except she died in that ravine. Lee nodded grimly. Which means Harvey's still out there, waiting for his payday. The insurance company is still investigating the claim, but eventually they'll have to pay out. Wesley had been counting on that. How long do we have? Maybe 6 months before the money releases. Unless we can prove fraud. We're going to do better than that. Wesley's voice carried a cold certainty that made even Lee uncomfortable. We're going to prove murder. Over the next month, Wesley implemented a plan that would have impressed his old business professors. First, he hired a second private investigator, Keith Platt, a specialist in surveillance who operated out of Arizona. Platt's job was simple: watch Harvey Christian around the clock and document everything. Meanwhile, Wesley began his own infiltration. Harvey's construction company in Tucson was small, but successful, specializing in residential remodels. Through a series of shell companies and false identities, Wesley arranged for Harvey to receive several lucrative job offers, all from the same fictional client. The client was supposedly Marshall Andrews, a wealthy retiree looking to flip houses in the Tucson market. Marshall needed a local contractor for a major renovation project, 6 figures minimum, with the possibility of ongoing work. Harvey took the bait immediately. Wesley's first phone conversation with his wife's killer was surreal. Harvey's voice was deeper than he remembered, roughened by years of cigarettes, but the underlying arrogance was unchanged. "Mr. Andrews, I appreciate you considering my company," Harvey said. "Can I ask how you got my name?" Wesley had prepared for this question. "A mutual friend recommended you. Said you were the kind of contractor who understood discretion." "Discretion? I prefer to keep my investments quiet. Too many people asking questions about money. You know how it is." Harvey chuckled. "I understand completely. What would you like to meet?" They arranged to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Tucson the following week. Wesley spent days preparing his Marshall Andrews identity, complete with fake references, a carefully constructed background, and most importantly, the subtle tells that would mark him as a man with money to steal. The meeting exceeded Wesley's expectations. Harvey Christian had aged well in his 10 years of hiding. His hair was shorter and streaked with gray. He wore expensive glasses, and he developed the smooth confidence of a man who'd perfected his craft. But Wesley saw through the facade immediately. This was still the same man who'd stolen his money, seduced his wife, and helped plan his daughter's murder. "The project I have in mind is ambitious," Wesley explained, sliding a folder across the table. "Complete renovation of a historic property. Budget is flexible, but I'm looking at around $300,000 to start." Harvey's eyes lit up. "That's substantial. Most of my projects are in the 50 to 100 range. I'm not most clients. I believe in paying for quality work." Wesley leaned forward conspiratorially. "And I believe in working with people who understand that sometimes the paperwork doesn't need to be comprehensive." It was a delicate dance, suggesting illegal activity without explicitly stating it. Harvey was smart enough to read between the lines. "I think we could work something out," Harvey said carefully. "When would you want to start?" "Soon, but I need to know I can trust you." Wesley pulled out a second folder. "I've done my research on your company. Very impressive growth in a short time." Harvey's smile tightened slightly. "I've been fortunate. Fortunate indeed. Starting over in a new state, building from nothing. That takes real skill." For just a moment, Wesley saw a flicker of concern cross Harvey's face. But Harvey was too experienced to break character. "I believe in fresh starts," Harvey said evenly. "So do I." Wesley smiled. "In fact, I'm planning a few fresh starts of my own. My wife passed away recently, and I'm looking to make some major life changes. I'm sorry for your loss." The words were delivered with perfect sincerity, and Wesley had to grip his coffee cup to keep from reaching across the table. This man had helped murder Emma, and now he was offering condolences with practiced sympathy. "Thank you. It's been difficult, but I'm focused on the future now." They spent another hour discussing the fake project, with Harvey becoming increasingly confident that he'd found his next mark. By the time they parted ways, Harvey was already planning how to steal from Marshall Andrews. He had no idea that Marshall Andrews was planning something far worse for him. That evening, Wesley called Keith Platt for an update. "Your boy's definitely planning something," Platt reported. After he left, he made 3 phone calls. First to a lawyer, probably checking on insurance payments. Second to someone he called Baby, female voice, sounded intimate. Third to a number I traced to a forger in Phoenix. A forger? High-end document specialist. The kind of guy who makes people disappear permanently. Wesley felt a cold satisfaction. Harvey was accelerating his timeline, probably planning to collect the insurance money and vanish again with a new identity. "Keep watching him. I want to know everyone he talks to, everywhere he goes." "You got it. But Wes, this guy's dangerous. Whatever you're planning, be careful." Wesley stared out his hotel window at the lights of Tucson. Somewhere out there, the man who'd helped kill his daughter was making plans for a new life built on Emma's blood money. But Harvey Christian had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed Marshall Andrews was just another victim. He was about to learn the difference between a predator and prey. Chapter 5: The Web Titans. Wesley's second meeting with Harvey took place at the supposed renovation site, an abandoned warehouse Wesley had rented under the Marshall Andrews identity. He'd spent the previous week transforming part of it into a convincing construction office, complete with blueprints, material samples, and the kind of expensive equipment that would make Harvey's eyes gleam with avarice. "Impressive setup," Harvey said, running his hand along a display of imported tiles. "You're serious about quality. I don't believe in half measures." Wesley spread architectural plans across a makeshift conference table. The timeline is aggressive. I want the work completed in 6 months. Harvey studied the blueprints with professional interest. This is a massive project. You're talking about a complete gut renovation, new electrical, plumbing, HVAC systems. Money isn't the issue. Finding the right contractor is. What about permits? A project this size will require city approvals, inspections. Wesley waved dismissively. I have people who handle those details. Your job is the construction work. It was another careful hint about illegal activity. Harvey was smart enough to recognize the implication. This was a cash job with minimal oversight, exactly the kind of opportunity he specialized in exploiting. I need a substantial deposit to order materials, Harvey said carefully. Probably 50% up front. Not a problem. Wesley pulled out a briefcase and opened it to reveal neatly stacked bills. $50,000 to start. Another $50,000 when materials arrive. The balance on completion. Harvey's pupils dilated slightly at the sight of so much cash. Wesley had counted on that reaction. Greed was Harvey's weakness, just as it had been when he'd stolen from their original company. This is very generous, Harvey said, his voice carefully controlled. I believe in incentivizing excellence. Wesley closed the briefcase. But I need assurance that you can handle the discretion aspect. This project needs to stay private. Of course, I understand the importance of client confidentiality. Good, because I've had problems with contractors in the past. One in particular, Harvey Christian. Ever hear of him? Harvey's face remained perfectly composed, but Wesley caught the tiny muscle twitch beneath his left eye. Doesn't ring a bell. Probably before your time. This was up in Colorado about 10 years ago. Guy seemed trustworthy, but he disappeared with a significant amount of money. That's terrible. You can't trust anyone these days. Wesley nodded sympathetically. The worst part was what happened to his family. His business partner's wife and daughter died in a hiking accident just last year. Tragic coincidence. This time Harvey couldn't quite hide his reaction. His hand tightened imperceptibly on the edge of the table, and his breathing shifted slightly. Wesley had spent months learning to read these micro-expressions, the tiny tells that revealed a liar's stress. Hiking can be dangerous, Harvey said carefully. Indeed, especially when you're not familiar with the terrain. Wesley locked eyes with Harvey. But I suppose people who make a habit of disappearing learn to navigate all kinds of dangerous territory. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken threat. Harvey was beginning to understand that Marshall Andrews wasn't quite what he seemed. Well, Harvey said finally, forcing a smile, I appreciate the trust you're placing in me. Where do you want to start? Immediately. Wesley slid a contract across the table. Standard terms, but with some specific clauses about confidentiality and timeline penalties. Harvey reviewed the document quickly, too quickly. A more cautious man would have taken it to a lawyer, but Harvey was driven by greed and the growing suspicion that he needed to wrap this up fast. Looks acceptable, he said, reaching for a pen. As Harvey signed the contract, Wesley felt a grim satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. Harvey Christian had just legally committed himself to a fictional construction project, providing Wesley with documentation of Harvey's willingness to engage in shady business dealings. But more importantly, Harvey had revealed his psychological state. He was nervous, off balance, and making increasingly desperate decisions. The insurance money couldn't come soon enough for him. Over the following weeks, Wesley played his role perfectly. He met with Harvey regularly, discussing progress on the fake renovation while slowly tightening the psychological pressure. Each meeting included subtle references to his tragic loss and the mysterious disappearance of Harvey Christian from Colorado. Meanwhile, Keith Platt surveillance was revealing Harvey's growing desperation. The phone calls to lawyers were becoming more frequent. Harvey had started drinking heavily and had gotten into several heated arguments with the woman Platt had identified as his girlfriend, Sabrina Fitch, a cocktail waitress with expensive tastes and flexible morals. He's cracking, Platt reported during one of their weekly calls. Yesterday, he spent 3 hours at a gun range, then drove around aimlessly for 2 more hours. Classic paranoid behavior. What about the forger contact? 2 more meetings. Your boy's definitely planning a disappearance. I got photos of him reviewing documents. Looked like identity papers for someone named Henry Clark. Wesley almost smiled at the irony. Harvey was so predictable. Even his fake names followed the same pattern. But Wesley's real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ronald Lee had been investigating the other end of the conspiracy, focusing on Monique's activities before her death. I found something interesting, Lee announced during their monthly meeting. Your wife wasn't just planning to disappear with Harvey. She was planning to eliminate him. Wesley looked up from the surveillance photos he'd been reviewing. What? I finally cracked her encrypted communications. The plan was more complex than we thought. She would fake Emma's death in the cave accident, collect the insurance money, then meet Harvey in Mexico to start their new life together. But she'd also been in contact with some very dangerous people in Denver, the same ones she owed gambling debts to. She'd arranged for Harvey to have an accident shortly after they collected the money. Wesley felt a cold chill. Monique had been planning to murder Harvey too. So the fall was really an accident? Lee shook his head. That's where it gets interesting. I don't think she fell. I think Harvey pushed her. The implications hit Wesley like a sledgehammer. He found out about her plan? Must have. Think about the timeline. She blocks Emma in the cave, then goes to meet Harvey at a predetermined location. Maybe she got careless, revealed too much about her backup plan. Harvey realizes she's going to betray him, so he kills her first. Wesley stared at the wall, his mind racing. That means Harvey Christian murdered both your wife and your daughter. Monique may have sealed Emma in that cave, but Harvey left her there to die. The revelation changed everything. Wesley had been planning to destroy Harvey financially and psychologically, then expose him to law enforcement. But this was bigger than fraud and embezzlement. This was a double homicide, and Wesley was going to make sure Harvey paid for both deaths. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. The insurance company finally released the $2 million on a cold Tuesday in March, exactly 8 months after Emma's death. Wesley learned about it from Keith Platt's surveillance report. Harvey had received a phone call from his lawyer at 3:47 p.m., followed immediately by a bottle of expensive champagne and a celebration dinner with Sabrina Fitch. Wesley stared at the surveillance photos of Harvey raising a toast. This man was celebrating Emma's death. He's planning to move fast, Platt reported over the phone. My contact at the document forger says Harvey picked up a complete identity package yesterday. Driver's license, passport, social security number, the works. Name is Henry Clark. How long before he runs? Days, maybe a week at most. He's already started liquidating assets. Wesley had been preparing for this moment for months. Everything was in place. It's time, he told Platt. Execute Phase 2. Phase 2 began with a phone call to Harvey's hotel room at 2 a.m. Harvey Christian, Wesley said when Harvey answered, his voice groggy with sleep. There was a long silence. Then, who is this? Someone who knows what you did to my daughter. Wesley hung up before Harvey could respond. The psychological warfare had begun. Over the next 3 days, Wesley systematically dismantled Harvey's sense of security. Anonymous messages appeared under Harvey's hotel door. His car was broken into, nothing stolen, but personal items rearranged in ways that made it clear someone had been there. Phone calls at random hours. Always the same message. I know what you did. Keith Platt documented Harvey's increasing paranoia. The man barely slept, checked his hotel room obsessively, and had started carrying a gun. More importantly, he'd accelerated his timeline. The planned departure was now set for Friday night. Wesley was counting on it. Thursday evening, Harvey received a final message. Warehouse. Midnight. Come alone, or I go to the police. The warehouse was the same location where Wesley had met Harvey as Marshall Andrews. But this time, Wesley had made some modifications. He arrived 2 hours early, using a key he'd had made months earlier. The construction office he'd built was gone, replaced by something far more sinister. Floodlights illuminated a single chair in the center of the empty space. Hidden cameras captured every angle. And most importantly, all exits were now electronically controlled. At 11:58 p.m., Harvey entered through the main door. He moved cautiously, gun drawn, scanning the shadows. "Hello, Harvey." Wesley's voice echoed from speakers placed throughout the warehouse. Harvey spun, searching for the source. "Where are you, you coward?" "Right here." Wesley stepped into the pool of light, empty hands visible. He'd spent months preparing for this moment, visualizing it, planning every word. Harvey raised his gun. "Marshall Andrews, I presume? Or should I call you Wesley Garcia?" "You should call me Emma's father." Harvey's face twisted into an ugly smile. "Emma Garcia isn't your daughter, Wesley. Never was. She was mine." "I know." Wesley's voice remained steady. "And you killed her anyway." "I didn't kill anyone. That was all Monique's plan. But you left her to die. After you pushed Monique off that cliff, you could have called rescue services. You could have saved a 9-year-old girl. Instead, you went home and waited for the insurance money." Harvey's gun hand trembled slightly. "You can't prove anything." Wesley smiled. "Actually, I can." The warehouse filled with sound, recordings of Harvey's phone calls, obtained through methods that weren't quite legal but were absolutely thorough. Harvey's voice discussing the insurance policy, coordinating with Monique, planning the accident. But the most damning recording was Harvey's conversation with Sabrina Fitch 2 days after the accident. "She got greedy, baby. Started talking about eliminating loose ends. So I eliminated her first. What about the kid? What about her? She was never supposed to survive anyway." Harvey's face went white as his own words echoed through the warehouse. "You recorded me," he whispered. "I recorded everything. Every phone call, every meeting, every moment of your pathetic life for the past 6 months." Wesley pulled out a tablet, showing Harvey the surveillance footage. "I have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and double homicide. Enough to put you away for life." Harvey raised his gun again. "Then I guess I'll have to kill you too." "With what?" Wesley held up a small device. "The bullets I replaced in your gun 3 days ago, they're blanks, Harvey, just like everything else about you." Harvey pulled the trigger. The gun clicked empty. Wesley had spent weeks planning this moment, but he'd underestimated the satisfaction of watching Harvey's face crumble as he realized how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. "You see, Harvey, I learned something important about you. You're a coward. You only attack people who can't fight back. Business partners who trust you, women who love you, children who depend on you." Wesley began walking forward, and Harvey backed away. "But you made one mistake. You killed my daughter, and I'm not someone who can't fight back." Harvey stumbled backward, his empty gun clattering to the floor. "What do you want?" "Justice." Wesley pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "I'd like to report a murder," he said calmly. "The suspect is here with me now, along with complete evidence of his crimes." As sirens wailed in the distance, Harvey collapsed into the chair Wesley had placed in the center of the warehouse. The fight had gone out of him completely. "Ow!" Harvey whispered. Wesley looked down at the man who'd helped kill his daughter. "You forgot something important, Harvey. I built my business on planning and execution. You steal and run. I build things that last." The police found Harvey Christian exactly where Wesley said he'd be, sitting in a warehouse chair, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, confessing to everything in a broken, rambling monologue. By dawn, Harvey was in custody, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of fraud. Wesley Garcia stood in his hotel room, watching the sunrise over Tucson, and felt something he hadn't experienced in 10 months. Peace. But his work wasn't finished yet. Chapter 7, Justice Served. The trial of Harvey Christian became a media sensation. The story had everything journalists loved: insurance fraud, murder, betrayal, and a methodical quest for justice that captured the public imagination. Wesley sat in the front row every day, watching as prosecutors presented the evidence he'd spent a year gathering. The surveillance footage, the recorded conversations, the financial records, every piece of the puzzle he'd carefully assembled. Harvey's defense attorney, Edwin Roberts, tried to paint Harvey as the victim of an elaborate frame-up, but the evidence was overwhelming. Harvey had made too many mistakes, left too many trails, trusted too many people who ultimately turned on him. The most damning testimony came from Sabrina Fitch, Harvey's girlfriend, who had agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. She described Harvey's confession in chilling detail. How he'd pushed Monique off the cliff when she revealed her plan to eliminate him. How he'd deliberately left Emma to die in the cave. How he'd celebrated the insurance payout. He said the kid was never supposed to survive anyway. Sabrina testified, refusing to look at Harvey. He said it was better this way, cleaner. Wesley watched Harvey's face during that testimony. The man who'd once been so smooth and confident now looked hollow, aged 10 years in the past 12 months. Prison hadn't been kind to him, but Wesley wasn't satisfied with just seeing Harvey convicted. He'd spent the past year building something much more comprehensive. During the trial's recess periods, Wesley met with other victims of Harvey's previous schemes. The FBI investigation had uncovered Harvey's full pattern of fraud going back 15 years. Dozens of victims across multiple states, millions of dollars stolen, lives destroyed. Wesley had organized them into a cohesive group, hiring lawyers, coordinating testimony, and most importantly, ensuring that Harvey would face justice for every single crime he'd ever committed. "You've done something remarkable here," said Agent Joey Hendricks, the FBI investigator leading the multi-state case. "Most fraud victims never get justice. Harvey Christian will spend the rest of his life in prison." But Wesley's most important victory came on a Tuesday in September, when the judge read Harvey's sentence. "For the murders of Monique Garcia and Emma Garcia, you're sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the additional counts of fraud and conspiracy, you will serve consecutive sentences totaling an additional 40 years. Harvey Christian would die in prison. As the judge's gavel fell, Wesley felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for almost 2 years. Emma's death was finally answered, but justice took many forms. In the months following Harvey's conviction, Wesley turned his attention to the broader implications of the case. The insurance company that had paid out Monique's fraudulent policy faced a civil lawsuit that Wesley had been carefully preparing. The gambling debts that had driven Monique to murder led to investigations of illegal betting operations in Denver. Most importantly, Wesley established the Emma Garcia Foundation, dedicated to cave safety education and search and rescue equipment funding. The foundation's first major donation bought advanced communication equipment for mountain rescue teams, technology that might have saved Emma if it had existed 2 years earlier. Wesley threw himself into the foundation's work with the same methodical intensity he'd brought to hunting Harvey Christian. Within a year, the foundation had funded rescue equipment for 12 states and trained hundreds of volunteers in cave safety protocols. "You've turned your tragedy into something positive," observed Dr. Nancy Joyce, a child psychologist Wesley had hired to help design the foundation's educational programs. "Emma would be proud." Wesley nodded, though the pain of Emma's absence was still sharp. He'd learned to carry that pain, to transform it into purpose rather than let it consume him. But late at night, alone in the house that had once echoed with Emma's laughter, Wesley allowed himself to remember. He kept Emma's room exactly as she'd left it, her drawings on the desk, her stuffed animals arranged on the bed, her favorite books stacked on the nightstand. On the anniversary of her death, Wesley sat in that room and read her favorite story aloud, the same way he used to when she was alive. It was a ritual that kept her memory vivid, a way of honoring the daughter who had been stolen from him. "I got them, sweetheart," he whispered to the empty room. "I got them both." Through the window, the mountains where Emma had died rose against the starlit sky. Wesley had climbed to those caves once, after the trial, to stand where his daughter had spent her final hours. He'd found peace there, finally understanding that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about ensuring that Emma's death had meaning, that other families wouldn't suffer the same loss. Harvey Christian would spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell, forgotten by everyone except the victims whose lives he destroyed. Monique was buried in an unmarked grave, her name associated only with betrayal and murder. But Emma Garcia was remembered differently. Schools used her story to teach children about safety and trust. Rescue teams carried equipment purchased in her name. Families stayed safe because of lessons learned from her death. Wesley had kept his promise to his daughter. He made sure that justice was served, and that her death saved other lives. It wasn't the ending he'd wanted, but it was the ending Emma deserved. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 2 years after Harvey Christian's conviction, Wesley Garcia received an unexpected visitor at his construction company office. The woman was in her mid-40s, well-dressed, but carrying herself with the careful posture of someone who'd survived trauma. "Mr. Garcia, my name is Therese Schultz. I was Harvey Christian's first wife." Wesley looked up from the foundation paperwork he'd been reviewing. Since Emma's death, he'd gradually transitioned from day-to-day construction management to running the Emma Garcia Foundation full-time, though he maintained his office at the company Brandon Barker now managed. "Please sit down." Wesley gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What can I do for you?" Therese hesitated before speaking. "I wanted to thank you for what you did to Harvey, and to tell you about what he did to our son." Wesley felt his chest tighten. He had a son, Danny. He would be 16 now. Therese's voice was steady, but Wesley could see the years of pain in her eyes. "Harvey disappeared when Danny was 4. I spent years thinking he'd just abandoned us. I never knew." She trailed off, pulling out a newspaper clipping about Harvey's trial. "When I saw this story, everything made sense. The way he'd been acting before he left. The phone calls he wouldn't explain. He wasn't just running away from us. He was running toward his next victims." Wesley leaned forward. "What happened to Danny?" "He grew up believing his father didn't love him enough to stay. Do you know what that does to a child? The questions, the self-doubt, the anger." Wesley thought about Emma's drawings, how even at 9 years old she'd sensed something wrong with her family. Children saw more than adults gave them credit for. Where is Danny now? Juvenile detention, unfortunately. He's been acting out for years, fighting, stealing drugs. I think he's been looking for his father, even after all this time. Therese pulled out a photograph of a teenage boy with Harvey's eyes, but a harder expression. The resemblance was unmistakable. "I was wondering if there was a way Danny could be part of your foundation's work. Not the administrative side, but the field work. He needs purpose, structure, something to show him that his father's actions don't define who he has to become." Wesley studied the photograph. He'd focused so intensely on punishing Harvey that he'd never considered the collateral victims, the children Harvey had abandoned, the families he'd destroyed beyond just financial theft. "Tell me about Danny's interests," Wesley said. Over the next hour, Therese painted a picture of an intelligent but troubled teenager who'd excelled at rock climbing and outdoor activities before his legal troubles began. Danny had natural leadership abilities but used them destructively, organizing other troubled teens in increasingly dangerous schemes. "The probation officer says he needs intensive mentorship," Therese explained. "Someone who can channel his energy into something positive." Wesley made a decision that would have surprised the man he'd been 3 years earlier. "Bring Danny to Colorado. I want to meet him." 2 weeks later, Wesley stood at the edge of a climbing facility in Denver, watching a lanky teenager scale a 40-foot wall with fluid grace. Danny Schultz moved like a natural athlete, but Wesley could see the anger in every controlled movement. "He doesn't trust adults," Therese warned quietly. "Especially men." When Danny finished his climb, Wesley approached him directly. "Nice technique. You ever been cave climbing?" Danny studied him warily. "You're the guy who put my father in prison. I'm the guy who proved your father murdered a 9-year-old girl." The bluntness clearly surprised Danny. Most adults try to soften difficult truths when talking to teenagers. "So what do you want from me?" Danny asked. "Nothing, but I might have something to offer you." Wesley explained the Foundation's search and rescue training programs, the partnership with mountain rescue teams, the real work of saving lives in dangerous terrain. "You think I want to help people?" Danny's voice carried years of accumulated cynicism. "I think you want to prove you're nothing like your father." Danny's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath. "How do you know what I want?" Wesley pulled out his wallet and showed Danny Emma's drawing, the stick figure family with the slightly separated mother figure. "Because my daughter spent years trying to understand why her mother didn't love her the way she deserved. She died believing something was wrong with her, instead of understanding something was wrong with the adults who were supposed to protect her." Danny stared at the drawing for a long time. "What happened to your daughter wasn't your fault," Wesley continued. What your father did to your family wasn't your fault either. But what you do with the rest of your life, that is your choice. 3 months later, Danny Schultz was living in a halfway house in Colorado Springs and working as a junior instructor for the Emma Garcia Foundation's youth safety programs. The transformation wasn't instant or complete. Danny still struggled with trust issues and periodic anger outbursts, but he'd found purpose. Wesley watched from a distance as Danny taught a group of younger kids proper climbing techniques, correcting their form with patience that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. "He's good at this," observed Scott Wallace, the Foundation's head of field operations. "Natural teacher." The kids respond to him. Wesley nodded. Danny had channeled his need to lead into something constructive, becoming a mentor for teenagers who were walking the same dangerous path he'd once followed. But Wesley's satisfaction came from something deeper than just successful rehabilitation. In helping Danny, Wesley had finally found a way to transform Harvey's legacy from pure destruction to something redemptive. Harvey Christian had abandoned his son, murdered Wesley's daughter, and destroyed countless lives in his pursuit of easy money. But Danny Schultz was now saving lives, teaching children to be safe, creating the kind of positive impact Harvey had never even attempted. It was, Wesley realized, the most complete form of justice possible. Harvey's bloodline would be remembered not for his crimes, but for his son's commitment to undoing the damage Harvey had caused. That evening, Wesley called Ronald Lee, the private investigator who'd helped build the case against Harvey. "I need you to find more of them," Wesley said. "More of what?" "Harvey's other victims. The families he destroyed. The children he abandoned. I want to help them all." Lee was quiet for a moment. "That could be dozens of people, Wes. Maybe more. Then we'd better get started." Wesley hung up the phone and returned to Emma's room, where he kept the Foundation's most important files. On her desk, next to the drawing of their family, sat letters from parents thanking the Foundation for safety equipment that had saved their children's lives. Emma would never see her 10th birthday, but her death had prevented dozens of other tragedies. Harvey Christian would spend the rest of his life in prison, but his son was growing into the kind of man Harvey never could have been. It wasn't the ending Wesley had planned when he'd first started hunting Harvey Christian, but it was, he realized, exactly the ending Emma would have wanted. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about redemption, transformation, and ensuring that good ultimately triumphed over evil. Wesley Garcia had learned the difference. Chapter 9. The Legacy. 5 years after Emma's death, Wesley Garcia stood before an audience of search and rescue professionals at the National Mountain Rescue Conference in Denver. The Emma Garcia Foundation had become a leading advocate for cave safety and rescue technology, funding equipment and training that had prevented dozens of tragedies. Every year, Wesley said to the assembled crowd, "We respond to hundreds of cave emergencies. Most end safely because of proper preparation, good equipment, and trained response teams. But some don't. Today I want to tell you about one that didn't, and why it changed everything about how we approach cave safety." Wesley had told Emma's story hundreds of times now, but it never got easier. He learned to control his emotions, to focus on the lessons rather than the loss, but the pain remained sharp. What had changed was his understanding of that pain's purpose. In the audience, Danny Schultz sat in the front row, now 21 and working as the Foundation's lead field coordinator. Next to him sat 3 other young adults, children of Harvey's previous victims, all of whom had found purpose in the Foundation's work. After the presentation, Wesley was approached by a woman he didn't recognize. She was elderly, with silver hair and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime working outdoors. "Mr. Garcia, I'm Laverne Riley. I lost my grandson in a cave accident in Utah 3 years ago. The equipment your foundation donated might have saved him if it had been there 6 months earlier." Wesley had heard variations of this story many times. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Riley. I wanted you to know that his death wasn't meaningless. The new protocols they developed after the accident, using your foundation's research, have already saved 2 other children. Your daughter's death led to changes that saved my grandson's death from being repeated." Wesley nodded, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with transforming tragedy into progress. But that's not why I'm here, Laverne continued. I'm here because of what you did to Harvey Christian. Wesley's attention sharpened. What do you mean? My husband was one of Harvey's victims, back in Nevada 15 years ago. Lost everything. Our ranch, our savings, our retirement. He died of a heart attack 2 years later, brought on by the stress of losing everything we'd worked for. Wesley felt a chill of recognition. Harvey's trail of destruction went back further than anyone had realized. When Harvey went to prison, I thought that was the end of it. Justice served, case closed. But what you've done since then, helping his son, supporting other victims' families, building something positive from all that pain, that's real justice. Laverne pulled out a worn photograph showing a younger version of herself with a man Wesley assumed was her late husband. They were standing in front of a ranch house, smiling with the confidence of people who believed their future was secure. Harvey stole our money, but you gave us back our faith in justice. That matters more than any amount of restitution could. After the conference, Wesley drove to the mountains where Emma had died. It was a ritual he'd maintained for 5 years, visiting the cave entrance on the anniversary of her death to update her on the foundation's progress. The cave entrance was now sealed and marked with a memorial plaque, Emma Garcia, her memory saves lives. The site had become an unofficial pilgrimage destination for families affected by cave accidents, a place where loss transformed into determination. Wesley sat on the stone bench the foundation had installed and pulled out his annual letter, a tradition he'd started the first year after her death. Dear Emma, he read aloud to the empty mountainside. This year the foundation prevented 43 cave accidents through better equipment and training. The communication system we developed saved 8 children who got lost in Kentucky caves. The Danny Schultz Scholarship Program helped 12 kids from broken families find purpose in search and rescue work. The list went on. Lives saved, families helped, communities strengthened. Each achievement had grown from the soil of Emma's death, transforming her murder into a force for protection and healing. Harvey Christian died in prison last month, Wesley continued. Lung cancer. Danny didn't attend the funeral, but he sent flowers with a note. For the father I never had, from the man I became despite you. Wesley folded the letter and placed it in the memorial box beside the plaque. Inside were similar letters from all 5 years, creating a record of how Emma's death had rippled outward into countless acts of kindness and protection. As the sun set behind the mountains, Wesley felt a presence he'd learned to recognize. Not supernatural, but the weight of purpose that came from living up to Emma's memory. His phone buzzed with a text from Brandon Barker. New cave rescue in Wyoming. 3 kids trapped. Local team has our equipment. Initial reports suggest successful extraction likely. Wesley smiled. Somewhere in Wyoming, 3 children would go home safely to their families because Emma's death had led to better equipment and training. Harvey Christian was dead, but his victims lived on through their commitment to preventing future tragedies. Monique was forgotten, but Emma's name was spoken with respect and gratitude across the search and rescue community. Wesley had learned something important in his years of pursuing justice. The best revenge wasn't destroying your enemies, but building something so positive that their evil was ultimately irrelevant. Harvey had tried to steal, murder, and destroy his way to happiness. Wesley had built, protected, and created his way to peace. Standing up from the memorial bench, Wesley took one last look at the cave where his daughter had died. The site that had once represented his greatest failure now symbolized his most important victory, not just over Harvey Christian, but over the despair that could have consumed him. Emma Garcia had died at 9 years old, but her influence would last forever. That was the kind of legacy Wesley could live with. As he drove down the mountain road toward home, Wesley's phone rang. It was Danny Schultz.